Right now it's difficult to compare what it's like the mind without dukkha. Sort of but when one takes a step to the stage of an Arya, how big is the difference between even from a perspective of
in 3 words?
Maybe.
The short answer is that the Puthujjana, when they experience suffering, they don't have a clear way out because they haven't seen the path to Nibbana, the end of suffering. Whereas the Arya has a way out. They know the path, but they've had insight into the path and the path to Nibbana. So Puthujjana, suffering, there tends to be the darkness and just the complete upadana, the complete identification and attachment to that state of suffering, without really seeing which way to turn to get out of it, and don't know any way out of it. Whereas an Arya, there's always, because they've already had insight, there's always that sense of there's a way out of it. They might still have some dukkha, but, depending on the level of their attainment, but it's not an overwhelming dukkha because there's this way out. So I gave the example of Visakha, the lady Visakha was a Sotapanna. She had all these children and grandchildren, nephews and nieces. He's training them all up, but there's one in particular who did all her Dhamma work for her, looking after the Sangha and doing everything. This nephew, I think, would do everything that she could do. So she really loved the nephew and sort of training it up. But then they died, and so she was overcome with grief, went to the Buddha. And if it had been one of the other family members, there'd be some grief, but very quickly passed by. But with this one, it was very intense grief because she loved and had invested so much in it. But she's still an Arya Pugala, so the Buddha gives the Dhamma teaching, and she can, the path very quickly is obvious to her how to deal with that grief, to see the impermanence of life, to let go of that attachment. So an Arya Pugala, they have some dukkha arise, but because they have a clear insight into the path, that dukkha will come up and then it's just quickly subsiding, and it's not nearly as extreme or intense as a Puthujjana. And the danger with Puthujjanas is because the mind is not seeing the path, it tends to be dark and deluded, uncertain about things. Well, then the big danger is that they actually go in a complete wrong direction when they experience dukkha. So people get a lot of dukkha and their way out is go and drink a lot, take drugs, do different unskillful things maybe where they don't keep their sila, and their mind goes further down rather than coming out of it and going towards insight and liberation. So if you practice to the level of attainment of becoming Arya Pugala, well then there's that reflection, the level of dukkha is a lot less than before. There's that clear knowing, before there was so much dukkha, now it's so little, so diluted, you could say diluted. That's a clear reflection because you've done the path and you know what you've done, you know what you've let go of.
As I mentioned today, he was talking to Ajahn that the Arya wouldn't hurt or kill any human being, not even the tiniest. Is that right? Not even the tiniest creature deliberately for their life.
อริยบุคคลจะไม่ทำลายสัตว์ในตัวเล็กๆโดยเจตนาจะไม่ทำ So you could think of an example, an Arya Pugala might, as a layperson, the layperson who achieved that might drive at night and got headlights. Maybe there are insects attracted to the headlights and die hitting the front of the car. The mind of the Arya Pugala driving may all beings be well, free from suffering, and not wishing them to hit, but they hit because that's just the way it is when you drive a car at night. There's actually no intention for them to die. That example.
Question, Ajahn. It's quite impressed by Ajahn Anan's answer about the meat issue in the lay people's discussion, and how the avoided getting into a view that should eat meat, should not eat meat, and seems to be a strong characteristics of lay people when even monks who are quite experienced and one beginning out have strong views of this is how practice should be, this should be like this, should be like that. And just for my own concern, dealing with that, I don't have the skill like Ajahn Anan to really skillfully compose such a beautiful answer, which seemed to just destroy the view, destroy any view, just understand, well, I'm just practicing for what is allowable and just, being humble and not, being obsessive about me or not obsessive about me. So it's quite powerful teaching. So it seems to be people, when they're not familiar, they see monks, especially from Thailand, Ajahn, who are extremely attained or have great skills and whatnot. I've come across from my experience, not on one occasion, on many occasions, even in Thailand itself, that people think, should he be boasting this knowledge or this or that? Should that be sort of kept a bit more? It's almost like they see it like they misunderstand it. They're helping the lay people and whatnot. It's almost like their abhinya or their knowledges, which the Buddha maybe some sort of considerations for a monk to be careful about, like boasting or whatnot, things like that. But unfortunately, lay people don't understand this because of Thailand. Maybe they're going to say something about past lives or something like that, and people might think, well, how does he know? Why does he know what I was in my past life? Things like that. So how does Ajahn Anan would give advice for myself if I had to explain that to Westerners who seem to feel like these monks are haughty, but they're actually very humble and things like that. They're just trying to help out, and it's more acceptable in Thailand than it is in Australia. Does that make sense, Ajahn? Try to be careful. How do I compose the question?
Translate word for word.
I think you understand what I mean anyway.
I think I understand. Normally as a bhikkhu, any bhikkhu, we're practicing developing metta for other bhikkhus and then for the laity. That's our normal practice. A bhikkhu should be doing that in line with our training. So as a junior bhikkhu, well, your metta tends to be more meditation and an attitude, but helpfulness and so on, but maybe one doesn't actually do much teaching. As a junior bhikkhu, that's not one's duty. When one becomes then an abbot or a teacher, a senior bhikkhu, then one is teaching. So sometimes as an expression of metta, well, one teaches, one gives people instruction in ways that will arouse faith, knowledge, understanding. In certain situations, certain groups of people who it may seem appropriate, or maybe one does talk sometimes in more detail or more about these sort of things, about past lives, about realms, other realms of existence, all this, if it seems beneficial for them, out of a heart, with a heart of metta. And in any group, even a group of, say, people with a lot of faith, well, obviously some people listen and they will increase their faith, and they understand and they're happy with that. There'll be others who maybe are of lesser faith, and maybe they're not quite sure about all this. So you would just encourage them, well, just listen. And you don't have to believe or accept or anything, you just listen, take it in with an open mind and wait and see. And sometimes over time, those people, through their own contemplation, their own practice, get to the point where what they've previously heard, that makes sense now, I understand, or I agree with that, or not, you don't know. And obviously in a group of people you'll have some different reactions and different levels of faith and different experiences.
The main point I was trying to, I suppose, beat around the bush is that some people, for a better word, can be vindictive towards the monk because they lack of knowledge and understanding of the Buddhist teachings and so forth, and see that as like, and if they take one understanding of, well, you can do this, you can do that, that he's he's like being a showman, he's abusing his gifts or whatnot. But I never see it like that, because I understand it's done always with great monks, it's nothing like that. But for some people, they're creating this negative karma. How do one, if I'm enroll, help to make them reduce that negative karma or that bad karma that they're making, having that view?
You encourage them to practice with what they've heard in a mature and with mindfulness, so they're not reacting with either aversion or delighting in what they've heard, but just taking it on board with an open mind to contemplate. So if at this stage they've heard something and they're not satisfied with it, it's critical of the monk or whatever, or they doubt it, they're fine. We'll keep an open mind and just practice with that. And encourage them to investigate and to keep practicing for themselves. So you're actually, encouraging them in the right way, so that eventually they'll solve their own sufferings and problems through their practice. And the Buddha didn't actually praise people who just believe everything they say, they hear. Wisdom comes through contemplation, so you are encouraging that in all practitioners. So you always encourage people to just listen, take on those words, and then practice with them, contemplate with them, until they understand for themselves the truth of it.
The 6 elements in Buddhism are word, space, and consciousness, and that encompasses the entire universe, everything that just exists. I was just wondering, what about time? Is time an illusion, or is it what role does time have in the elements?
Time is not an element; it's something that human beings designate, a designated reality, meaning it's a superficial, conventional reality. And you can see that there are different systems of working out time. The sort of general one we use is to do with the sun, day, hours, days, years, seasons, years, centuries, millennia, on and on and on it goes. But it's all based around the sun. It's all just conventional reality that humans have thought out as a convenient way to help them run their lives, basically. But it's not an ultimate reality, it's not an element, it's not anything, it's just what humans have done themselves, created for their own use.
Because I remember reading that Aboriginals, before white men came, had quite a different perspective of conventional time. They didn't have words for yesterday, today, or tomorrow. So, how, if it's just a convention, how does, why doesn't everything happen at once? Is it all happening at once?
Again, time is just this designated reality, it's conventional reality, samuti satcha we call that. It's just conventional reality. We do take what we have here to make time, the way we establish this conventional reality. So what do we have? We have the fact that the world is spinning, turning. You have the solar system, you have the sun at the centre of the solar system, the world is spinning. So we have this conventional reality, sunrise, sunset, and you say that's a day. But the sun doesn't actually rise, it doesn't actually set. The world is just spinning, so it appears that way, and so we can make use of that to have time and break it down into small periods of time or long periods of time. But that's just the way it is. The world is spinning, there is this sun which appears to come up, appears to go down. This is just a designated reality which people use because it's useful for communication, for all the things we do as human beings. But it is just something superficially added on to what's there already. And what's there already is just the fact that there's this world and it's spinning like this, so you can make use of that for making up systems of measuring time.
So, with the understanding of ultimate reality, you understand that convention as a convention rather than being caught up in thinking that was a flow? Was it just the flow? Is time like our experience of the flow of the mind, you could say, which ends in Nibbana?
The mind of the practitioner who's, say, reached the level of an Arya Pugala is not going to be focused or very concerned with time at all. This sense of separation from time. What the mind of the Arya Pugala is focused on is Magga and Phala. And Magga is the factors of the path, Sila, Samadhi, Panya, or the Eightfold Path, how strong they are, whether they're there, whether they're all present in the mind, and the results that they're giving. And that, the mind is just focused on that to the point where it's not concerned about time really. That's a separate issue. But within that, obviously, we do use the convention of time, and even as practitioners, and even someone like that, they might be aware, well, today I've practiced. Today my samadhi came up very strong. Today I practiced and there was insight. Now my samadhi has subsided or is a bit weaker. Or tomorrow or the next day I'm practicing bringing up the level of my samadhi again. We do have that convention and conventional reality of time, and we might be observing the strength or weaknesses of our path factors in the mind over a period of time. But it's not like you sort of have this sense of linear movement towards Nibbana. It's a matter of days and months going to. It's not like that at all. It's just the mind focused on itself and whether the factors of the path are present or not. If they're not present, to bring them up, to develop them. If they're there, to maintain them. It's focused more like that. And even we do have the convention. We say one who's reached Sotapadipala, they won't have an 8th life. At most they'll come back for 7 lives, maybe less. We do have that conventional use of time, but even then, the mind of that being is not going to be thinking, 7 lives to go. They're just thinking about the path, the quality of their mind, what's the factors of the path, whether they're there, how strong they are. So pretty much, he said, it was separating from time and just sort of, that's a convention that you use it, you don't understand it, but it's not the important thing.
I feel for me it's important because I've noticed that a lot of the suffering around the problem or anything is related to projection into the future. This will get worse, or I'll never be free of this, or this bad mood or anything like that.
It's going to be like this forever.
Yeah.
What you just described, we would say, wrong view. It's wrong thinking. You have some dukkha now, some problem, suffering. You start thinking, well, it's going to be like this tomorrow or next year or for the rest of my life. You're letting your mind proliferate about the future, the unknown, the uncertain, just creating something out of nothing or adding on to your suffering in that way. So that would be based on wrong view. It's vipavadanha, it's aversion, it's not wanting something to be the way it is and wishing to get rid of it, and it leads to that kind of proliferation. So, the wise way is to establish mindfulness and bring up reflection on the Four Noble Truths. There is this dukkha, it is here, it's to be known, to be realized, this dukkha. If this dukkha has arisen because obviously Sila, Samadhi, Panya, the path out of dukkha is somehow weak, somehow some factor or factors are missing. This dukkha has come up, overwhelmed me, taken over the mind as it were. The way out of it was to develop the path, to bring up more Sila, Samadhi, Panya, to practice the path, to abandon this dukkha. You might take this sort of, if you have that habit, I'm going to be suffering like this forever and ever or the rest of my life, you have that sort of sense. Well, you take that then as a way to stimulate your practice rather than just proliferating that way. You say, so that I don't have to suffer like this again in the future, I must establish Sila, Samadhi, Panya, the path right now. I must bring that up so that I can abandon this craving that is causing me this suffering. You take it just as a way to motivate you to practice more in the present moment. That would be right view, using the Four Noble Truths in that way.
Did Paul have to sit with much pain when he was practicing in his early years?
He has to sit with much pain in his later years. He's got a lot of pain sitting. And you'll ask him. Yeah, he went through a lot of pain, physical and mental. It's not one or the other, it's both in the practice. Because one's practicing to overcome defilements, to establish Sila Samadhi Panya, particularly to develop samadhi and then insight. One has to go against all kinds of defilements and desires and all kinds of things. There's a lot that can bring up both physical pain in the course of doing that, and then the mental suffering of struggling, working with your mind. You have to go deal with fear and different kinds of strong emotions and all kinds of stuff. You're learning to establish mindfulness through all that, so you have no choice but to confront, go through different kinds of pain. Yeah.
When I was staying at Marp Jan a few years ago, I had at night when I was sleeping, I had two either dreams or nimittas. I wasn't 100% certain, but wanted to understand how much truth one can ascribe to those sensations or those experiences when they come up in the dream state. How much one can ascribe to the validity of those sorts of things.
It's a way you can learn. If you have a very vivid dream or a nimitta, you can learn from it by comparing, say, with what you've learned from a teacher as to what the path is, the right path of practice, and whatever is coming up in that dream or that nimitta, you compare with what you understand is the right way to practice. Maybe it's telling you something, that you are practicing correctly. This is the sort of thing that might arise, or maybe it's incorrect practice that's telling you that. But it's just a way of comparing with what you've learned and heard of how to practice. This is a very auspicious, good nimitta, and hopefully one day you'll be able to ordain. Make the Bharami, the merit of ordaining and practicing as a monk. This is what we call ordaining the heart. The heart ordains first, and externally maybe still be a lay person, but the heart is aspiring to and wishing to ordain. So it's already sort of happy with that aspiration.
How do we, regarding the metta practice, how do we give ourselves metta? How do we become more proficient at giving ourselves metta?
Kind of adjusting your mind to develop the right, correct attitude and the correct thinking coming from that right attitude, right view, which is to wish oneself well, wish oneself progress in the practice of Dhamma, to develop Sila, Samadhi and Panya. Getting that aspiration, that kind of attitude, to always wish that for oneself, and then of course wishing that for others, that they may progress in the Dhamma, see the Dhamma and be happy and peaceful from that. And also developing the ability to acknowledge, say, if one has notices faults in oneself, defilements, one does things wrong, weaknesses, to be able to acknowledge them, but then to forgive oneself and let go, so that one isn't holding on to negativity directed towards oneself. To be able to do that, recognise, I've got this fault or this defilement, true, but I start afresh, and I'll make my aspiration to work with it, let go of it, but I'm not going to hold on to a lot of negativity towards myself because of that.
With forgiveness and letting go, it's like that is actually a more effective way of growing one's character rather than sort of holding on to it, remembering it, and
yeah, that's correct. It's a better way to develop oneself.
Can I ask you another question? The one who knows the full rule, how does one ascertain the objectiveness of that, so that the one who knows is the one who knows correctly, not the one who knows incorrectly?
It's a gradual development based on to keep re-establishing mindfulness in the present moment over and over again, and then reflecting, seeing the arising, passing away of phenomena from moment to moment. And as one does that, one developing a sense of self-confidence based on this, the continuous presence of mindfulness, as one is maintaining that, sustaining that, and then seeing the arising, passing away of phenomena, seeing the lack of self in that, because they're conditioned things that arise, pass away, seeing the lack of self in phenomena, both the mindfulness and the insight present in the mind gives one more confidence that, oh, this is true, this is the true way of seeing reality. And that, over time, gradually that confidence based on this true seeing of reality will grow, and one will trust in it more, and one knows, oh, this is not delusion, this is not the deluded way of seeing things.
So is that to keep coming back to the three characteristics, is that to keep shining that in on whatever's transpiring in the heart?
Yeah, that's correct. Any more? Go. Can always ask again tomorrow night, later.